So just to have a think back, you can do this on a whiteboard or in your book, it's up to you. As many parts of plants that you can remember. There's a picture there to help you if you can't remember some parts of plants. And then what is the difference and what is the link between cells, tissues, and organs? I'll give you 3 minutes, off you go. Okay, you've got 2 more minutes left. You've got 30 more seconds. Okay, let's have a look at the answers. So this first is easy. The stem, leaf, roots, and flower are the parts of the plant that you need to remember. Now, the thing that links an organ to a tissue is that an organ is made up of tissues and a tissue is made up of cells. So that's how you link them all together. So on to today's title. Make sure you've got a book or something to write on, or if you're using a revision card, you've got a revision card in front of you. This is still part of biology paper 1, but it's the second topic and it's called organisation. So the lesson is plant tissues, organs, and organ systems. So I'll give you 30 seconds, make sure you underline it and you write the date. Okay. So our challenge today is to describe the structure of a leaf. Quite a common question, different parts of the leaf and what they do. So it's describing that structure, and then our spire, which will be either covered in this lesson or part of next lesson as well, is to explain how substances move around the plant. So what you've got to remember is that plants are a living thing, and therefore then they're made up of organs like you and I are. And those organs, the main organs you need to know about is the stems, the roots, and the leaves. Now you could include there the flower, but we don't get examined too much about the flower. You need to know a little bit about pollination. But their main organs, stem, roots, and leaves. And those organs will come together and make an organ system. And they will carry around things like transporting substances around the plants, such as water or glucose and minerals. Okay, so they are our organ systems. So key points: plants have organs just like us, and the organs are stem, roots, and leaves. And what we'll look at today is the leaf. Now this is what a leaf looks like, and when we're talking about this, that top part there is the big fat green part that you're used to seeing. And then if you turn the leaf upside down, the bottom part is that stoma and that lower epidermis. So what we call this is a transverse section of a leaf. So it's like cutting through that leaf and seeing all the little bits. Now that leaf is very, very thin generally, and these are all the different layers that are found in that little thin part. So let's go through them. It doesn't say that you need to know this, but there's a waxy cuticle on the top, and that cuticle is waterproof and see-through. Now it's waterproof, so it lets the water run off, but it's also see-through, so it'll let light through. So waxy cuticle, not on the specification, but usually a good one to know. Good one to know for leaves. If you feel the top of a leaf, it's always a bit waxy, so this makes it waterproof. Then you got the upper epidermis. You don't need to know too much about this one either. You need to know that it's there, so upper epidermis, but that is see-through so that light can come through, so light can travel through it and pass through into the much more important layer, which is the palisade mesophyll. You can usually get away with saying palisade layer. So this is a layer of cells, which is a tissue then, because it's a group of cells, like we said at the starter. It's a layer of cells called palisade cells, and they have loads of those little green dots in. So have a think about what those little green dots are and why they're so important to plants. Well, those little green dots are the chloroplasts, and that is one of the most important organelles, I would say, in the world, because without those little chloroplasts, the plant can't photosynthesize. We'd be dead because there'd be no oxygen, and the plant would be dead because there'd be no glucose for the plant to survive. So hugely important that that can get as much sunlight as possible, and that's what the palisade layer, that layer of tissue, does. Lots of chloroplasts stacked full of them, catch as much sunlight as possible so the plant can photosynthesize. So that's the sunlight part of photosynthesis. Well, what else does a plant need? It needs some carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide comes through this other layer called the spongy mesophyll, or the spongy layer. And that allows the carbon dioxide to move into those palisade cells so it can carry out photosynthesis. And also it allows the oxygen out. The oxygen is a waste product for this plant, and most of it is going to move out through the bottom of that leaf. So we've got the palisade layer, and then we've got the spongy mesophyll layer. The last layer you need to know about is the lower epidermis. And really the key bits on this lower epidermis are these guard cells. So these guard cells will fill with water and they will swell up and they will close these little holes at the bottom. Now these little holes are called stomatas. So these stomatas are at the bottom of the leaf. There's a couple at the top as well, if we're honest. But they talk about them being more at the bottom. There's much more at the bottom. These stomatas are little holes, and that's all they are. They're just a special name for this little hole, a stomata. And these guard cells will swell up and close the stomata when the plant needs it to, like when there's not very much water around, or they will open up to let all of that oxygen out and get some carbon dioxide in. So the guard cells just open and close the stomata. The stomata is just the hole in the leaf, usually at the bottom. So have a think about the way you need to come up with a way of remembering these layers, because it's such a common question that students get wrong. So you've got the waxy cuticle, upper epidermis, palisade, spongy, lower epidermis, and in that lower epidermis there are guard cells and stomata. So I used to use this one a while back. I used to use this saying. I came up with this in a VMG. It's stuck with me forever since, and it's stuck with the students. But if you can make your own, it helps you to stick with it. It's actually not what's up slugs. It's when under pressure. So when you're in your exam and you're really stressed out and you're under pressure, sleep like grandma, and then pick somebody who's got an S in their name. So I can have sleep like grandma Singleton. Okay, so when waxy under upper epidermis palisade pressure, sleep spongy like lower epidermis, guard cells grandma and Singleton. Please do not go to sleep in your exams. It's not going to help you. The other way I was just looking at it, as it went down there. I thought this film a couple of years back called Turbo about these snails which are really fast, and I thought, oh, that looks like what up slugs. Look, so W what, and then up, and then slugs without the U in it. Okay. So I want you to think about that, how you remembered it, and then try and label that layer of the leaf. Okay, the main key boxes are the ones on the outside that I'd like you to try. Do it on a whiteboard, do it in your book really quickly. Go from the top down to the bottom. Off you go. I'll give you 4 minutes. so through some answers. So that top bit was the waxy cuticle. Then you've got the upper epidermis, then the palisade layer, or the palisade mesophyll, then the spongy mesophyll, and then at the bottom there you've got the lower epidermis with the stoma, which are the holes, and the guard cells, which are in the lower epidermis that open and close that stoma for the plant to get some carbon dioxide in and some oxygen out and some water out. Talk about that water out a bit more next lesson. So we're just going to recap this all completely so we can remember it, because like I said, this is a common area that students really struggle with. So the waxy cuticle reduces water loss because it's got that waxy layer, so it stops the water coming up and out. The upper epidermis is transparent so that light can pass through into this palisade layer. In the palisade layer, there's lots of chloroplasts for photosynthesis. It's always near the top of the leaf, and that's so that the plant can get as much of the sunlight as possible. The spongy mesophyll contains these spaces in between them, and that's to trap the carbon dioxide and allow oxygen to move out. The lower epidermis has these little holes in called stomata. Lots of stomata, the plural for it is called a stoma. Okay, and that allows carbon dioxide into the leaf, oxygen out of the leaf. Now you can see on this little picture here, there's a little purple area with some brown bits in the middle of it. That's the vein. That's that main part of the leaf that runs through it. And that brings obviously the water to the plant, to the leaf, because we've talked about sunlight getting into that plant, onto that leaf. We've talked about carbon dioxide. Well, the water comes through this vein, and it also moves the glucose out through this vein as well. So this vein is actually quite important for the plant so it can get all of the nutrients it needs. So I want you to try and match these up. Now, if you're doing this on a whiteboard, you can just put one and put which one it is. If you're doing this in a book, you might as well write these out so you've got it written down permanently. So I'll put epidermal tissue and what that does, palisade layer, what that does, etc., etc. Now, I've thrown this one in here from a meristem tissue to see if you have been going back to the other lesson, which I asked you to do if you didn't know what the meristem tissue is. So it's a bit of recap. Again, if you are not sure, then why not use the process of elimination, match them all up, and then whichever one is left is the meristem tissue. I'll give you 4 minutes to do that. It's quite a long one. Off you go. Okay, let's go. So from some answers. So the epidermal tissue covers the whole plant. The palisade, that's where photosynthesis occurs. The spongy mesophyll allows air or contains air spaces to allow the carbon dioxide to fuse out of into the cell if it's in the palisade layer, out if it's just respiring. The xylem transports water. The phloem transports sugar. So that leaves the meristem tissue, which is the plant stem cells. Remember those cells which can divide into any other type of cell. Plant cells have them throughout their whole life. So these are the types of exam questions you might get. Can I just just tell you some common mistakes with these types of things? You see where it says draw one line from each level of organisation to the correct part of the plant. Even though it's the one and it's in bold, we still get students who will draw and try and match them all up. Okay, so they'll draw 5 different lines there. Now it says draw one line from each organisation. So you're going to draw one line from the organ and to one of those parts, and then one line of tissue to one of those parts. Okay, so organ, where would you put it? Tissue, where would you put it? Here's your answers. The organ was a leaf and the tissue was a spongy mesophyll. I just want to go through these really quickly. And again, I'm not going to apologize for going through these over and over again and carrying on recapping them. But it's really, really important that you do know these. So why do palisade cells have lots of chloroplasts? What is the function of the air spaces? Why are there more stomata at the bottom of a leaf than at the top? And what is the function of guard cells? Quick note on them. I'll give you 4 minutes. Off you go. Okay, you got another minute. Okay, so the palisade layer has lots of chloroplasts because they need to absorb light energy or sunlight for photosynthesis. The function of the airspace is to allow carbon dioxide to diffuse into the palisade layer and oxygen to diffuse out of that layer. Why there's so many more stomata at the bottom of the leaf, and that stops water loss from the plant. And the function of the guard cells is to open and close the stomata. Last three questions. Which substances enter and leave via the stomata? There are three. When would the stomata close? And what is the function of the waxy cuticle? I'll give you 2 minutes. Off you go. Okay, 1 more minute. Okay, so the substances which will move out of the stomata and come into the stomata, carbon dioxide comes in, oxygen goes out, and water vapor goes out. While the stomata close, well, that's in dry conditions, and that stops the water being lost out of the plant. So if you think about it, if it's getting very, very dry, then what the plant does is goes, right, I'll close that stomata up, and I won't lose any more water out of it. Now, the issue with that, obviously, is it can't get any carbon dioxide into the plant. So this is why water loss is never counted as something called a limiting factor in photosynthesis. It's nothing to do with water, because before water becomes an issue with how fast photosynthesis can come, the plant closes its stomata, and now it's not water that's the issue, but the carbon dioxide becomes the issue. What is the function of the waxy cuticle? Well, that is to minimize water loss. You can also say that it's waterproof, to let the water run off into the. So there's a Google quiz for this lesson. Please have a go at this. I will give you 4 minutes to do that. It's multiple choice. Off you go. You've got 1 more minute. Okay, if you're still working, then obviously just pause the video and carry on. So now we've done the describe. That was to describe the structure of a leaf and recall key terminology. We're now onto the explain. So there's two bits that you need to know and remember. So this is called the phloem. Now I talked about the veins in the leaf carrying glucose around. So that glucose is going to be made mainly in the leaf, and it's going to move around to every single part of that plant. Well, why does every single part need it? Well, it's the same reason why every single part of your body needs it, and that's so the cells can respire and release energy. So the phloem moves the glucose from the leaf to every single cell in that leaf, so it can give them cells glucose for respiration. So it transports sugar around, and what it does is it has these little, they're called sieve plates, but they're little pores, little holes in between each phloem cell, and it allows that cell sap to go through it. And it can go in both directions, so it can go it mainly goes from the leaf to the rest of the cell, or to the rest of the plant, but it can go from the stem down to the roots, etc. And that movement of glucose is called translocation, and that's what the next lesson is all about. The other system, so this is carrying just, the phloem is just carrying glucose around. Well, that cells, the palisade cells in the leaf need water, and that water comes from the roots. So this has a different system, and this is, the water is traveled through the xylem vessels. So the xylem is made with dead cells, so they're not living cells, and they don't have any walls in between them. They are just one continuous tube, and they will carry the water from the roots and the minerals from the roots, but they only go in one direction. They just go from the roots to the leaves, and that is it. That movement of water is called transpiration. Okay, after trans in both of those, transport, it means movement. Okay, so transpennine express, etc. There's lots of trans words. And then spiration is to do with water. So there's a Google quiz just about those two. They're only very short, so I'll give you 2 minutes to answer those questions. Okay, you've got 1 more minute left. Okay, so we have described the structure of a leaf. That was right at the beginning of the lesson. So remember, either when under pressure, sleep like grandma, and then someone with an S in their name, or what up slugs, if you can work that one out. And then we've also talked the beginning bit about how substances are moved around the plant, but there's more on that in the next lesson, which is basically transpiration and translocation. So it's a bit more in detail. So just have a look at this exam question here for me. Now I've got this little sign here up here called bug, and this is just to remember how to answer exam questions. So the B is to box the command word. The U is to underline the keywords, and then the G is to have a good go at it. Okay, so the command word in this in this question is describe. It says describe one way palisade cells are adapted to carry out their function. So we got to describe. That's just say how they do it. Okay. The keywords is the palisade cells. You don't need to talk about that xylem, even though it's there, and you don't need to talk about the stoma or the guard cells or anything else. Just the palisade cells, and that's how they're adapted to carry out their function. Now, what they haven't done here is put lots of little dots in there, which would have really helped you. So then it's just to have a good go at it. So describe is a keyword. We don't need to explain. You have to say why. You just need to say how they are adapted, and it's 1 mark. We'll go through this together. Okay. And then these ones are a description of the xylem, and then which one is the role of a phloem. So I want you to have a think about those questions, have a go at them, go back if you need to and have a look at that question about describe the adaptation of a palisade cell, and then which one of these is the description of a xylem and a description of the phloem. 30 seconds. Okay, so the answer for the previous question, which was describe the adaptation of the palisade, is that they have lots of chloroplasts, or many chloroplasts, for photosynthesis. The description of the phloem is this one: transports water in the transpiration system. So it's about water and transpiration. And then the phloem is transports dissolved sugars or glucose using translocation. So a quick progress check just to double check you're happy with it all. P down to T, we did this right at the beginning of the lesson. Again, I told you I'm not apologising for going through this again and again. They are such badly done questions in exams. If you can get this, you're ahead of the game. So P to T, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 names, off you go. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Okay, so P is the upper epidermis, and you may have put waxy cuticle as well in there. Q is the palisade layer. R is the spongy mesophyll. S is the lower epidermis, and those cells there for T are guard cells, and the other little hole bit there is the stem. So if you're going to make a revision card on this, these are the things I suggest you put on. Remember, this is biology paper 1, so I suggest you put B1 in the top, so you know which revision cards you are taking in and looking at before the exams or the night before the exams, etc. So a leaf is an example of an organ, and therefore it is made up of tissues. That just reminds you that the leaf is a tissue. Leaf is an organ, and organs are made up of tissues. The upper epidermis is clear to allow light to transport through. The palisade layer is filled up with chloroplasts, and that can absorb sunlight for photosynthesis. The spongy mesophyll, or the spongy layer, allows carbon dioxide into the palisade layer. The lower epidermis, all you need to know about that really is it has guard cells, and they open and close the stomata for gaseous exchange. So that just means for carbon dioxide to come in and oxygen to come out. The plant has two other tissues that you need to know about. The phloem, which transports glucose around the plant. They have little holes in them to allow the glucose through. And the xylem, which allows water to move from the roots to the leaves. Now, there's a little bit in there that I haven't talked about in this, and they are strengthened by something called lignin. So if you are still writing this down, that's fine, because I run through them very quickly, and I expect you writing them down. You can either pause the video, or I'll give you another 2 minutes in order to write those bits down. Okay, so I'm going to move on now, but if you're still writing these down, please just pause it, that's fine. So I've got some exam questions for you. So if you print these out, or if you do them online and then print them out, or write the answers in your exam, in your books, that's fine, but have a good go at them. Exam practice is really key to doing well in these exams. Well done, guys. Keep it up. Bye.